top 5 valid and real reasons why divorce is your only option. Hi friends, welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video is all about the reasons why divorce is your only option. Are you taken aback as I'm advocating divorce? Divorcing your spouse makes you feel amputated and completely lost, doesn't it? You want to save your marriage at any cost. But there are times you find it near impossible to hold your marriage together. Your dreams of everlasting happiness in your marriage are often belied when things you never imagined happens to you. You're emotionally shattered about the ways to handle the untoward incidents happening in your married life. You try to save your marriage but finally give in and divorce your spouse as you have no other go. Are you right in divorcing your spouse? It depends upon the reason you quote for divorcing your spouse. It is sad that in today's marriage scenario, you divorce your spouse for feeble and fickle reasons. When you do not like your spouse, you divorce. When you do not like the habits of your spouse, you divorce. When you're bored with your marriage, you divorce. When your way of living and thinking is different from your spouse, you divorce. When you're bored with each other, you divorce. These are all silly and often ridiculous reasons you quote for divorcing your spouse. When you divorce your spouse for such frivolous reasons, you're mocking the very concept of marriage. It is sad that you do not understand your marriage in its proper perspective. You cannot expect your spouse to behave in a way you like. Your spouse will definitely be different from you. Your spouse will do things differently and think differently. You cannot quote these differences as reasons for divorce. Most modern couples divorce for such meaningless reasons. But there are times when divorce is the best option available to you. When you lead a married life of physical and mental torture, you cannot live with your spouse. When the behavior of your spouse exceeds the limit of human decency, it becomes a valid reason for divorce. It is very true you should make your marriage work at any cost. When you break your relationship for innocuous reasons, you make a mockery of the institution of marriage. But when things go out of hand, you can do nothing about it. It is when divorce becomes your only option. Shall we now look at the 5 valid reasons why you should divorce your spouse? The number 1 valid reason you should divorce your spouse is when there is life-threatening physical abuse. Do not think that only husband abuses his wife physically. In this modern age, wife is not left far behind in physically assaulting her husband. When physical abuse is common between you, it becomes the worst type of marriage to live through. When your spouse displays maniac behavior, your married life is horrific as he or she shows the terrible tendency of psychopathic behavior. When your spouse has a maniac tendency, he or she uses weapons to hurt you. Your maniac spouse derives vicious pleasure when he or she sees you in pain. Your spouse literally thirsts for a blood-splattered confrontation with you and thinks of different barbaric ways to physically torture you. It is very dangerous to live with a spouse who does not know the values of life. You should immediately withdraw from such a meaningless and dangerous marriage. You should also complain about the torture you underwent to the concerned authority so that your violent spouse does not go in search for another prey to satisfy his or her maniac tendency. There is absolutely no sense in continuing in a relationship which offers you only violence. Divorce is the only option to free yourself from this life-threatening violent married life. The number 2 valid reason for divorce is infidelity. The most bitter experience in my life was when I saw my husband with another woman. My friend lamented. I never knew that my husband had been living with a woman behind my back all these years. I will never forgive him. My friend looked grim. My friend had been married for 22 years. But when her husband made a mockery of their marriage by having an extramarital affair, my friend filed for a divorce. I too felt that my friend had a valid and real reason for divorce. If there is one thing that worse hits your marriage, it is unfaithfulness. When you're faithful to your spouse, you naturally expect the same from him or her. The love for your spouse grows and thrives when he or she is loyal to you. But when your spouse betrays you, you're emotionally and mentally shattered. When your spouse has fun behind your back, it just means he or she has overstepped the limits of loyalty. You should not tolerate the cheating of your spouse at any cost. You cannot and should not digest the infidelity of your spouse. When your spouse betrays you and leads a sly life with another person, you have a real and valid reason for divorce. The number 3 valid reason for divorce is desertion. My mother had a friend whose husband left her and to this date has not returned. Since my mother's friend belonged to the old school of traditional outlook towards marriage, she remains married to a person who never really was a family to her. But the modern generation of today will never tolerate such desertions. When your spouse deserts you, you should never accept it. You should immediately file for divorce as your spouse does not deserve you. You should never waste your life for your spouse who has left you in the lurch and let you fend for yourself. When your spouse does not live with you as a family, you have a valid and real reason for divorce. The number 4 valid reason for divorce is addiction. You did not marry a spouse to reform him or her. You married your spouse to live as his or her equal partner. But when your spouse indulges in addictions like drinking and drugs, you find your married life nightmarish. You must try to pull your spouse out of his or her addiction. But when your spouse deliberately avoids a helping hand and literally swims in alcohol, you find it near impossible to stay in your marriage. When your spouse is addicted to drugs, you're at your wits' end not knowing how to save your marriage. Addiction to drugs and alcohol bring along with it physical abuse, mental torture, stealing money, being irresponsible, and whatnot. When your spouse does not try to reform himself or herself but tries to make your life abusive and intolerable, you have no other go than to divorce your spouse. The number 5 valid reason for divorce is criminal record. Your spouse might have hidden his or her criminal record from you. You're emotionally shattered when you come to know about the criminal activities of your spouse. You find your humanity unwilling to accept the criminal attitude of your spouse. However much you try, you find that you cannot save your marriage. All you want to do is to escape from the humiliation of living with a criminal. When your spouse hides his or her criminal record from you and still indulges in criminal activities, it proves a valid ground for divorce. Can you see the valid and real reasons why there are times your marriage cannot survive? It is tough to revive your marriage when there is no love, care, concern, and decency in it. When your marriage has violence, physical and verbal abuse, cheating, desertions, it is better ended and annulled than endured and tolerated. Did this video make you understand that there are times you will be better off when you divorce your spouse? Marriage realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part your relationship goal.